Well, let's go on to a really hot subject right now within the NCAA, and that's should we pay college athletes? And many of you know of the O'Bannon decision that came out in August. That was an antitrust lawsuit that said basically that the athletes should be compensated to some degree for not paid, but compensated to some degree for their efforts. It may take the form of a stipend. It may take the form of a cost of living fill-in above financial aid. And it may take the form of trust funds. What do you think as athletes? Who's got an opinion? Emily?
No, I really do not think that athletes should be paid or compensated. I think it is, as we've said before, it's a privilege to be a student athlete, and I think we need to take advantage of that, being a student and still being able to play your sport. I don't think we need to be compensated for that. I think we need to take advantage of that privilege that we're given to continue playing our sport in college, and I don't think there's anything to be compensated for.
Someone have an opposing view? Caitlin?
Not opposing, but I just think that we are compensated through scholarships. You know, we're getting a college education, and that's something that should be valued. And I think the people that want to be paid don't necessarily value that. They want to be a professional athlete, but we're amateurs. You know, we're amateur athletes, and most of us, at least in the MAAC, are here to get a good education. And I think that that's the most important part of going to college for sports. I don't think it's about
I've always
money.
felt the compact between the school and the athlete was that they would give you the skills to go out and be employable after you graduate and have the kind of background that makes you a well-rounded individual, and the athlete would represent the school on the playing field or on the court. So I think it is a very basic tenet, but it has been challenged, and a lot of it's because of the high salaries many coaches are getting, not necessarily in the MAAC, frankly, but in some of the BCS high-level football programs, they get a lot of recognition. And I always wonder, what would the other students on campus, and many of them are taking on debt, and I know not all of you are on full scholarship, I understand that as well, but anybody feel like what the student body would think of that? Sure.
I know, personally at my school, they would think that that's ridiculous. I think personally as an athlete, the key word for me is student. I'm there not only to play my sport, but also to get the best education possible. I kind of see, though, with the larger schools where they have big SEC football or ACC football, where they're bringing in so much money to the school, but at the same time, I think we have to look at it and say, hey, like, we're students. We're only 20 years old. If you want to be a professional, there's a time and place for that, but that's not at the NCAA.
Anybody else have thought?
Yeah,
Sure,
just
Emily?
based off what she just said is we're all student athletes. It doesn't matter where you go to school, what division, what conference, what sport. It all boils down to you're a student in college playing the sport that you love and you grew up loving. And that's why you're here, and that's why we're all here today. Because if we didn't fall in love with the sport X amount of years ago, it's a privilege.
So it's
I
Mary.
have something to say about maybe the big-time football college athletes who have their jerseys sold and their faces in a video game or whatnot, but I think what they're wearing that's bigger is their school, and I think they're forgetting that because they might have their name on their jersey and they might be having fans who are really supporting them and whatnot. I think if they want to go pro, they should use, their school is representing them and getting their name out and whatnot. They should use that. That's almost like a free resume for them to go pro. They don't really need to be compensated $5,000 or whatever. They're getting food, they're getting housing, they're getting an education. I know for these big D1s, so I don't think they need extra money.
Matt, you had an opinion?
Yeah, but then from the other standpoint, while the athletes are getting free advertisement, so are the universities. I mean, yes, University of Alabama is a great school, but what scholars do you know from the University of Alabama? None. So without their prestigious football program, maybe we don't know as much about them, and that's free advertisement for them. They're also pulling in millions and millions and millions of dollars based on the backs of these athletes. And again, I'm not an advocate that all athletes should get paid, but I think that there is a time and place for it. And when you have universities and the NCAA at some points not paying athletes while they're pulling in lots and lots and lots of money, and they don't have many programs, because again, these people are pulling in lots of money now. But especially if you look at football, there's 7 rounds in a football draft. 3, maybe 4 make it to play in the NFL, and then all of a sudden you don't have any money. Yet you were able to generate money for those programs while you were in college. And you walk out with a degree, maybe, unless you were drafted after your junior year, and you don't really have much to do because you were supposedly exploited at the college level. So I think that there is an argument to be made either way. And again, not an advocate for all collegiate athletes being paid, but for those who do contribute largely to the university endowments through ticket sales and jersey sales and to like EA Sports and NCAA video games. I do think that there is a time and place to reward those athletes or just remunerate them for the amount of money that they've been able to bring in for those prestigious organizations.
You think the equation changes a little if we're talking about for some type of need test? So if an athlete doesn't have a lot of resources, many of us come from backgrounds that have resources, but if they didn't have those resources and and they had demonstrated need, that maybe that becomes the equation.
That's possible, but I really do think that it should largely be based on merit. So at less need-based, and again, there will be some athletes that need money, but also there will be first-round draft picks that are signing $10 million contracts out of the draft. And, you know, maybe they shouldn't be, though they may have contributed more to their university's wealth. I think it would be money more poorly spent if we're going to recompensate them for money that they're going to comfortably make in the future. So I do think that there needs to be a need component, but there also needs to be a large merit component to it as well.
Oh, Ed, you think the quarterback gets paid more than the offensive lineman?
No, not to that extent, but I agree that I think for these big-time schools that generate so much money and revenue for their schools and athletic programs, I think for these special cases of these schools that have great athletes that are I mean, in all honesty, they are getting recruited to go play professional. They're not really getting recruited to be a student athlete at the school. They should have a way of getting compensated for what they do to the school. And obviously, a lot of times these athletes are putting in more hours, through summer programs. Maybe a player that is playing for the University of Alabama, he has to spend his whole summer at Alabama and he can't go get an internship somewhere. So in that case, if he doesn't make it to the professionals now, he's kind of behind on maybe going out and getting a job somewhere, and then he doesn't have the money from all the time that he had spent playing his sport. So obviously it would be hard for every athlete to be paid, but I think in some extreme cases, and I think a lot of times we see when schools get all this money, which I think is good to an extent, they put it back into the school. So they're buying these wonderful facilities, giving kids a bunch of gear and T-shirts and sweats, and which is all nice. But after a certain time, how many more sneakers and sweats do you need? And I see that's kind of where some of the money is going. Where maybe if we put it in a fund or that the kids could get after they graduate that have invested all this time and use it to kind of get on their feet as they get a career, I think maybe that could be money that's better spent in that case.
Sure. So, Brianna, you're from Connecticut.
Yep.
And you have a coach there at UConn, Gino Oriamo.
Yes.
And he was quoted a week or so ago saying that he thought the athletes should get paid, but he also wanted the ability to fire them.
Yeah.
So if you get into that employee relationship, there are other elements to it. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's tough because I think as a coach, when you recruit players, you kind of take on the responsibility to help them grow into this great college athlete. And, sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes they flatline and stay at the level they were at. So I don't think that should be put on the players' shoulders. I think that's more of a coaching responsibility, and I don't think the coach should be able to take out that level of performance on the player.
I've seen Gino for many years, and I was on the women's basketball committee for 5 years, and he was probably just trying to counterbalance some of the thoughts. You pay the athletes. Well, if you're paying the athletes, there's some responsibilities that come with that as well. And there's also a lot of question about whether or not taxes come into play and all that. But I do think we'll find a place where we can push some more benefits back to the student athletes. I think the BCS conferences in particular, the Autonomy 5 as they're known now, are really going to try to improve the student athlete welfare. One of the things they passed immediately upon the new governance system was meals 24/7. Of course, I'm not sure that we've adopted that across the board in the MAAC. So who went in and asked their athletic director when the 24th? You did? How'd that go? How'd those conversations go?
I think it was made clear that won't be happening anytime soon.
How about you, Mary Kay? What did
basically
Rick
the
say?
same thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not the case for MAAC schools, but they're gonna try to give us the student athlete experience as the best that they can. So.
Yeah, it is a much different world.
Yeah.
When you look at the budgets at schools like Ohio State or in Alabama, they're 130, 140 million dollars. That's bigger than our school budget overall in many MAAC schools. Because we are small privates, but I think we do try to push back some great benefits to you all to the extent we can afford it. And that's the other issue with the pay or the stipend is that as we have additional costs put on us, are we going to start cutting back on sports? And we'd hate to see that because we really do like having 24 sports championships across a wide breadth of different sports. So we'll try to maintain that, but it's a constant challenge in the MAAC, and I think in many of the 27 other conferences that aren't in the Power Five, that to balance those budgets and find the revenues to provide good opportunities for you all.